Well, hello and welcome to the devotion for Tuesday, May the 26th. I just want to go ahead and share with you to give you a little bit of a heads up. Sunday is May the 31st, so we'll be wrapping up 1 Samuel. We're just going to go right into 2 Samuel. So for next Monday, June 1, our devotion will come from the first chapter of 2 Samuel. But as we look in this chapter, it's kind of like watching, if you would, maybe the same movie or a rerun of something that's happened earlier in the movie. As once again, we see Saul hot on the trail of David. And he keeps going through this whole deal about how, he's after David. He's going to kill David. He finds out David's righteousness. David, I'm sorry. David, I won't do it again. Then he does it again. So we find this scene once more. We know earlier that David spared Saul when he took his robe in that cave and cut off a corner of it. So now David and one of his men actually sneak into the camp where Saul is sleeping, and could have taken his spear, Saul's spear, and rammed it through him. And that's what David's bodyguard wanted to do. But David, well, let's just talk about what David does have to say. Because I think this is something that really gives us reason to think about things. Verse 9, David said to Abishai, "Do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" Then on down in verse 11, "The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed." Now let's think about that. Did David want to spare Saul because Saul was a righteous guy? Because Saul, was a good guy, was a good king? No. He was the Lord's anointed one. You know what? David knew that rightfully God was choosing him to be king. And he was in line to the throne. And in the natural, he had every right to kill Saul because he should be king and Saul was out to kill him. But no, do not touch the Lord's anointed. I think it gives us a lot of reason of deep thought. We could argue who's the Lord's anointed. Well, obviously the anointed is the Christ. And in here we could say, well, it was just the king. But you know how easy it is to criticize people in leadership. I do it. But we blast people and we don't even stop to think about the place that the Lord has placed them in. It's not what the person is or who they are individually. It's where God has placed them. And just for us to think about, Paul writes these words in Romans chapter 13. And we've got to understand, Paul did not live under a good government. He lived under a dictatorship, killed Christians. But yet he says, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except for God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. It should actually read, there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by him. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. That's hard words when you stop and think about who the government is that Paul's talking about here. I'm not going to try to explain all this. I'm just going to try to get us to stop and think. Should we not be a lot more cautious before we blast our president, blast our governor, blast our spiritual leaders, blast people that are in place in leadership. Now, I'm not saying we go along with bad things. Thank God we live in a day where we can vote and we can vote people out of office. But somewhere in this, we've got to realize David said, I won't touch him. He's God's anointed. Now, I've heard pastors use that to abuse their people. Well, obviously, that's not what God means. But I do think we have to recognize that God places people in authority. And many times, we do not understand maybe why people in authority make the decisions they make, because we do not have privy to all the information. I think I would just want us to stop and think today. Maybe one day we go today without saying something negative about our whoever, president, governor, pastor, whoever else it is. Think about God's words. Think about what Paul said under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. God bless you.